What's up guys, my name is Ace, and when I was making the Finn gun guide, I made a comment that it just might be the most accurate full auto gun in the entire game, and that got me thinking, even though I've covered every gun individually in the gun guides, I had never really taken a deep look and compared recoil patterns across all the guns to find out which one is most accurate, or which ones are the most accurate in the game. So in today's video, what I'm doing is I'm breaking down the top 10 full auto guns in this game when it comes to recoil. Now with this, just a few things to consider. First up, like I said, this is only full auto weapons, so obviously I'm not going to throw the FR556 burst in here, or a semi-auto for instance in here. This is just full auto guns. And also, it is worth noting that when it comes to recoil, a lot of it is subjective and has to do with how you're able to control that particular recoil pattern. Some people do better with one type of recoil pattern, where other people do better with other types. So while there is some subjectivity here, what I try to do is focus on being objective, and what I was specifically looking for was magnitude of recoil with a 30-round recoil plot. Also, the stabilization or the side-to-side bounce, that's another important factor. If you have something that doesn't kick upwards very much, but it bounces side-to-side like crazy, that's obviously not a very good recoil pattern. And then finally, the gap between shots is also something to consider. Some guns don't kick super high up, but the first 3 or 4 shots are completely out of control, and therefore that would basically eliminate them from this list of being the best recoil gun. So some of you might disagree with a few of the things on this list just because it feels better in your hands and you feel more accurate with it, and that's totally fine. I tried to keep more of an objective formula for this though. So let's kick it off with number 10 on the list. This is actually the M91, which is an LMG that I don't see used very often at all, but it turns out it's actually quite accurate. You can see here with this 30-round recoil plot, it kicks pretty much straight upwards. It starts to lean a little bit to the left after the first, 10 to 15 shots. But with this, there's not that much side-to-side bounce, and the overall magnitude is quite reasonable. So when I was comparing this recoil plot to the others, it just barely squeaked in here at number 10. Moving on to the next one, this one is also an LMG, and this is the MG34. And with this, we've got a pretty similar magnitude of recoil over the M91. However, it's a little bit better than the M91 because it kicks literally straight upwards. There's some side-to-side bounce as it goes upwards, but the path itself is perfectly vertical, unlike the M91, which leans a little to the left. And this makes the MG34 objectively a little bit better than the M91. After that, we've got yet another LMG on the list. This is the PKM, which is actually very similar to the MG34 when it comes to recoil. However, the magnitude of recoil isn't quite as high, so it doesn't kick upwards as much, and therefore it's actually a bit easier to control than the MG34, but it does still have that straight up recoil path, which is great, and this means the PKM definitely deserves to be on this top 10 list. Now, moving on to our first assault rifle on the list, this is the Grau 556, which I was actually surprised came in number 6 on this list. I thought it would be much higher up. But a big thing to keep in mind is I was also doing this testing with no attachments equipped. Yes, you could deck out the Grau to become extremely accurate, just like some of the ones that are on the top of this list, but that requires attachments, and therefore it's not really a fair comparison. And also those super accurate guns, you can add extra things onto them to make them even more accurate. But yeah, I just wanted to explain briefly why this is number 6 on the list and not number like 1 or 2. But the thing with the Grau is it has a pretty similar magnitude of recoil compared to the PKM. However, it doesn't have nearly as much side-to-side bounce when it comes to the shots, and therefore it is objectively a little bit easier to control. But with that, let's move on to number 5 on my list. This is the Mark 9 Bruin. Now, the Bruin did get a bit of a nerf to its recoil in one of the more recent updates, but it's still a very accurate LMG. It's still got very controllable recoil. Doesn't kick side to side too much, kicks a little bit upwards and then starts to lean a bit to the left. But overall, very easy to predict and control this recoil. There's not that much side to side bounce as well, which is really important when it comes to that controllability of your recoil. And yeah, you can very clearly see it just doesn't have much recoil at all. As for the next one on my list, this one might surprise some people. This is the Holger. The Holger is incredibly accurate. It's got a very low magnitude of recoil. There is almost no side to side bounce with this as well. It follows that recoil path pretty much perfectly. And this is one of the reasons that I feel like the Holger is a little bit underrated in Warzone. I still don't think it's like the best gun or anything, but I think it's a bit on the underrated side, and with the right attachment combination, you can really make a Holger do some work. After the Holger though, moving on to number 4 on the list, this one was quite surprising. This is an SMG, and this is the MP7. This is the only SMG on this list, and I did test all of them, and while some of the other SMGs, they don't have the same magnitude of recoil, it doesn't kick upwards as much as the MP7, those ones tend to bounce side to side so much that there's no way they could make it on this list. Because side-to-side recoil is much more difficult to compensate for and predict compared to vertical recoil. With the MP7 though, it's got very little side-to-side bounce, it's also got a very manageable magnitude of recoil, and it's actually a little bit more accurate than the Holger. So yeah, this one surprised me a little bit. I wasn't sure if any of the SMGs would make it, but the MP7 absolutely did at number 4. And with that, we're going to move on to number 3 on the list, and this one was no surprise that it would be way up top here. This is the M13. The M13 is a super accurate gun, especially for the fire rate. We're talking 900 plus rounds per minute, and we've got a very low magnitude of recoil, not that much side-to-side bounce, and especially when you add even just one recoil control attachment to this, it makes this gun just pinpoint accurate. It's definitely one of the best guns in the game when it comes to raw accuracy. Now, moving on to number 2 on the list, this is the Fin. It turns out it's not the most accurate full auto in the game, but it is really close. It's definitely up there. This one kicks pretty much straight upwards, maybe a little bit of a lean to the right, but that's hardly even noticeable. Not much side-to-side bounce at all, and very little jump between shots. This is an incredibly accurate gun. This thing's basically a laser beam. And I honestly don't understand why I'm not seeing more people use this in Warzone, just because it is so accurate. I guess probably largely due to the lack of a headshot multiplier. But if you're hitting every single bullet at super long ranges anyway, you're still going to be beating out the guns that aren't as accurate, but do have a headshot multiplier. And this just leaves us with number 1 on the list, which I'm sure you guys would have guessed it by now, just using the process of elimination. This is the Kilo 141. Now, the thing with the Kilo is it does have a decent amount of deflection to the left, but the overall total magnitude of recoil is the lowest out of all of these guns. It's got almost no side-to-side bounce, and this is why it made it to the top spot. Now, personally, if I'm not looking at this purely objectively, if I bring my own personal feel into this, I would much rather be using the Fin at long ranges when it comes to accuracy over the Kilo, because I don't like recoil patterns that lean to the left. And also, the Fin just kicks basically straight upwards, unlike the Kilo, where you do have to compensate for that more horizontal deflection. However, like I said, I wanted to try and keep sort of an objective guideline to follow here, and if we're following that guideline to a T, the Kilo 141 is the most accurate gun in Modern Warfare currently. And with that, that's pretty much it. I'll throw up all of these recoil plots kind of side by side so you can see, and they're going in order here as well, so you can see them compared to each other. A couple things I wanted to address. Some people might be wondering, where's the M4 or the Ram 7? Because those are both very easily controlled guns as well, and they are very accurate with the right attachment combination. But that's the thing, when we're just looking at the base version of these guns, the M4 and the Ram don't really stand out. They're actually a little bit worse than all of the guns that I have on this list. Like, if I had to place them, they would probably end up at the number like 12 or 13 spot on the list. And this is where I just want to reiterate, just because a gun isn't on this list, that doesn't mean that you can't make it into a super accurate laser beaming machine. It's just objectively not quite there. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for this video that I found to be quite enjoyable to make and also interesting to make, because I'd never really thought about putting all these recoil patterns side by side to really get a good indication. I've always just looked at them individually, and I think this is really going to help when it comes to thinking about future class setups, especially in Warzone where recoil is king. Of course, I'd like to know in the comments section below, what did you guys think about this list, and were you surprised to see some guns being better than others, for instance, when it comes to these recoil patterns? Just let me know all of those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.